Hey, Cameron here. Welcome back to the Busy Gardener channel. We're going to talk about something a little bit intimidating today. You see all this fruit? Yes, I'm going to tell you to take a bunch of it off. We're talking about thinning. Let's get busy. Okay, so when we're talking about thinning fruit, what are we talking about here? We're talking about taking fruit that is perfectly fine fruit and ripping it off the tree and throwing it on the ground, and it sounds like absolute madness. In fact, when I was telling my dad to do this, he didn't quite break down in tears at the idea, but the thought of taking fruit off of his tree and throwing it on the ground just didn't compute. And I know that it's a really weird thing. In a lot of respects, it's kind of like pruning. Remember, a fruit tree is trying to do something different than what we're trying to do. A fruit tree is trying to create as many little seeds as possible so that way it can replicate itself. So there's a little bit of flesh on top of a seed and a whole lot of them, and they're hoping little animals will come and carry those and spread them. Well, that's not what I want out of a fruit tree. I don't want a bunch of little flesh-covered seeds. What I want big, juicy fruit, and the kind that you buy in the store is what we're going for. And so the way that we can do that is by removing fruit, thinning the number of fruit that are on a tree, so that way all of those resources of the tree are being diverted into making that fruit as big as possible. And as healthy as possible. And so in this video, we're going to talk through a few things to look for, some of the most common things that you ought to do when it comes to thinning fruit. And so we're going to show some examples of that, as well as talk about what kind of fruit you ought to be thinning. The tree is totally loaded with fruit. It's absolutely loaded, and you're thinking, yes, I've got all this fruit. That is actually more of a starting point, though. All this is doing is giving you lots of fruit to choose from, so as we thin, we're able to leave the fruit that's going to do the best for us. See, the tree, each of these leaves is like a little factory, and it's taking that sunlight and it's converting it into carbohydrates and sugars, and that's going to support each of these fruit. And so what we're wanting to do is to increase the leaf to fruit ratio, and the way we do that is by reducing the number of fruit. So that way, let's say 5 of these leaves right now is working for every one little fruit. If we remove fruit, now we're going to have maybe 25 leaves working for every one fruit, and that's a really good thing. So let's look at some of the specifics of how to do this stuff. We need to talk also for a second about what kind of fruit should even be thinned. Essentially, most deciduous fruit, so any type of stone fruit, should be thinned. Any of your nectarines and plums and cherries and peaches, all of those need to be thinned, as well as your pome fruit, which are your apples and pears, quince, if that's something that you've got, should all be thinned as well. Don't thin things like citrus or avocado or any of the subtropicals. Those do a lot of automatic thinning, and the fruit hangs on the trees for a lot longer. So you don't have to worry about those. Those trees will thin for themselves. But when it comes to these stone fruit and pomes like apples and those are the things we want to come in and thin. Maybe wondering when you should even be thinning your fruit. Is it when the flowers first pop out, or when the fruit is nice and big already? The best time to come and thin your fruit depends on which kind of fruit it is. If they're stone fruit, like this Arctic Star nectarine, you want to thin when they're anywhere between 3/4 of an inch, when the fruit starts becoming 3/4 of an inch to an inch big. And on pomes like apples and pears and that, you want to thin those anywhere from 1/2 inch to an inch when the bulk of the fruit is those sizes. So on this Arctic Star nectarine, we see that we have a few of these sizes going on. We're maybe even caught to this tree a little bit late. This is maybe about 1.5 inches big, this one here. You see this one's about maybe 3/4 of an inch. We've got some tiny ones. Now the reason for the fruit size difference is because the buds, when they're developing, are developing in different ways. Some develop better than others, and large fruit is an indicator that is a well-developed piece of fruit from a well-developed bud. And so we're going to favor those larger pieces when we're doing our thinning. So if we were to come on here, you notice that there are a couple of really big ones here, and you notice that there are a couple of medium-sized ones, and then you've got a bunch of little small ones. And so we're going to talk about the spacing of how to do this, so you know how many to leave on this branch. So you see here there are maybe 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, maybe 10 fruit on this little branch. That's way too much fruit on here for this one branch to support and give good quality fruit. So we're going to come and thin this, and we're going to use some of those principles. When it comes to thinning stone fruit, we're going to talk through that, and then later in the video we're going to look at how to thin apples. Stone fruit, when you've got smaller stone fruit like plums or apricot, you're going to thin those to every one fruit every 2 to 4 inches approximately. If you're dealing with larger ones like peach, or even like larger nectarines or like a nectarplum, you're going to let those, you're looking for every 3 to 5 inches in between the fruit for that. And so what that's going to do is it's going to relieve some of the strain on the tree, so there isn't going to be as much weight. You're also going to make sure that the fruit isn't touching, because ideally the fruit isn't going to be touching, because that can rub it the wrong way. Pests can get in there more easily. So let's look on here. We noticed that there are a couple of really big fruit, and then these kind of medium-sized ones. The way that this works is you want to essentially look at 2 to 4 inches on this nectarine. Let's say we're going to look for every 3 inches, 3 or 4 inches or so. Even if you find 2 really nice ones, it doesn't mean like, oh goodness, they're near each other, so I can't choose this one, I have to rip this one off. That's not true. What you want to do is you want there to be some spacing. They're on opposite sides of the branch, so it's going to be okay to leave both of those. And you want to leave in this space, how many? This space is maybe 10 inches or so we could leave maybe 3 fruit on this one branch overall, okay? So it's not that it has to be that space in between, but that should be the average number of trees or of fruit for the branch. So on the end here, we notice that there are these little guys. I'm just taking and I'm twisting these off. Twisting them off on this nectarine is pretty good. There's some little ones over here that I'm twisting off. Okay, so we've left some larger ones on here. So now we've got 4 to choose from. I want to take one more off. Now, so which one should I take? Should I take this one off or this one? Well, here's a little hint. The further out on the branch the fruit is, the heavier it's going to be on the branch. So if you have to choose, you want to favor leaving the fruit that's closer to the trunk, closer to the center of the tree. So that way, if you have a lot of fruit out here, you want to thin it more heavily than the fruit that's further back here. So if I had to choose between this one and this one, I'm going to tear this one off because that's going to relieve some of the weight on here. So you see that we've gone from having 10 fruit on here to leaving 3 on this 10-inch stem, and that's going to be the way to do it. So we're going to look at a couple of other branches as well and see what we can find out here. You're looking at me and saying, Cameron, you're ridiculous. You want me to spend 5 minutes on every single little tiny twig? I'm just going slow because I want you to see how this stuff works. This is actually a really fast process once you get the hang of it and once you know what you're looking for, the principles that you're using. So as we go through here, we're just going to work really quickly to thin the fruit. I just want to make sure it's really clear what we're looking at. So let's look at this one, for example. Come on in close and look at how many fruit are on here. So we see that we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 fruit on this thing. And we want to take a bunch of the fruit off. So again, we're looking to leave the larger fruit, because that means it's going to eventually give us larger fruit. We're wanting to have approximately on this another maybe 10-inch long stem. Is going to be room for maybe about 3 fruit total. And we're going to favor the fruit that is leaving the fruit that's near the base of the branch rather than the stuff at the end, because the stuff at the end is going to weigh the branch down. So we see some really small ones, and we're just going to twist those small ones off. We're going to find some kind of medium-sized ones. We're going to twist some of those off. Now this one's a little bit unique because we've got, we still have some really good-sized ones on here. So I think we're going to leave 3, maybe even 4 on here. Although I'm being greedy if I leave 4. I think I should just leave 3. So what I'm going to do is, I want there to be some spacing if I can help it. On the back here, that's one. Take off that one, and that one. Okay, so I don't know if you can see it from here. We have 1, 2, 3, and then I left the 4th one on here. Yes, I'm being greedy. But there's a lot of leaves on here, so that's going to really help this out a lot. Now you remember that I keep my trees pruned really no higher than I can reach them, and one big reason for that is because I don't have to take extreme measures to take care of the tree, to thin the tree, to prune the tree, or to harvest the tree. And so when it comes to thinning, in some of the large commercial orchards, and they've got these humongous trees, or maybe in your yard you've got really big trees, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna go climb up a ladder to thin the fruit at the top of your canopy? Or are you gonna come through and just be able to, at ground level, be able to thin the fruit off? Something that they have to do in some of these other orchards is they have to attach a hose to a stick and start beating the clusters of fruit and hope that they get enough knocked off without damaging their tree. And so this is, even though it takes a little bit more time, it's much more precise. You're not gonna damage your tree in the process. So that's just one more advantage of keeping your trees no higher than you can reach. So this is that same tree. I'm just gonna spend some time and we're gonna even just speed this up to see exactly what this process looks like when I'm not taking the time to explain every little nuance of it. But I'm just looking for that small fruit, the stuff that's doubled up. I'm gonna look at this fruit here and I see small fruits here. I'm just jamming off the fruit. I'm kind of just doing this by, using my eyeballs. Again, we're looking on nectarine for maybe every 3 to 5 inches or so spacing. And so looking good here, but there's some duplicates here. Want to take one off of there. I'm going to try to favor leaving the fruit near the base. So if I have to take one off, there's another little one hiding there. So I'm still going a little bit more slowly and deliberately. Usually I'd be squatted under. That's where you can see a lot of the fruit. So on this branch here, there's tons. So take off the one. Even though this is a nice piece of fruit, it's at the end. I don't want it weighing down these branches. So of these two, really easy. You're looking for the smaller one. Smaller one goes. Something you also want to look out for, we haven't seen any yet, a lot of times the peaches have them, are these things called doubles, where you see this essentially 2 or 3 pronged fruit, and you want to take those off as well. Those are malformed, and if you had to choose that versus a regular one, you get rid of those doubles. So on this little guy here, look at this little branch, should have 2 fruit on it, we've got 5 on it. So I've got 1, 2. Over here we've got a few fruit, I'm going to take one off. So squatting down here, I can see kind of more clearly where all the small fruit are, where the big ones are. Yeah, there we go. This is great. We're going to have a lot of good fruit growing on this thing. Here's a great example of a double. This peach, you see, are essentially 2 pieces of fruit fused into one. And this happens when the weather's too hot the season before and there's not always maybe adequate watering when that happens. And it splits and it keeps these 2 fruit fused into one. Well, that's not going to grow into a full-size, normal, good quality peach. I'd rather take that off and leave one that's a lot healthier just a little further down the stem. This is okay to thin out something like this. These clusters of fruit right here, what are you going to thin out? You see that these are all at the end. This would be a great example if I was going to make a single thinning cut right here. If I cut this, I would be reducing the number of fruit on this tree by, 10 fruit? Just with a single cut. So as I was talking earlier about an example of thinning fruit by making a single cut, this is exactly the example of what I would be talking about. This means that I can leave 5 fruit, 4 fruit, 6 fruit elsewhere on the tree just by making the single cut. Look at this fruit. See? It's beautiful. It's set all of this fruit all the way down the branch. That's really amazing. That's wonderful. However, I don't want that many tiny little fruit. What I want is nice large fruit. So we're going to try to leave the larger fruit. We're spacing 3 to 5 inches, so I should take that one off. I'm going to take that one off. I'm going to take that one off. Let's see if you can even see in here. Get in here a little bit closer. The shade's making it a little tough, I think, for you to see it. So we'll take that one off. We'll take that one off, we'll take that one off, that one. And so we're left with 1, 2, 3, 4 on this branch. And you see they're about 3 to 5 inches apart when everything is said and done. What we're gonna do now is look at how to thin apples and other pome fruit. So this little Dorset Golden apple already has a good fruit set on it. Remember, we're looking for fruit that's between 1/2 inch to 1 inch big, and that's a good time to thin this tree. Now, this is a little bit different because you don't have fruit growing along a branch, you've got them in clusters coming off of these fruiting spurs. And so what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to use the same concept of looking for better developed fruit. You're wanting to look for larger fruit and leaving that fruit, favoring that fruit. And on each spur or each cluster, you want to leave no more than 1 to 2 fruit per cluster. So you want to choose the largest fruit on here. So now, out of this bunch, which one's immediately the one that ought to go? Well, this one right here. This one's just nothing. It was not even fertilized. Next one in size to go is this one. You're voted off the island. Gone. And then I'm just going to really have to just these are all kind of the same size. So I'm going to pick those that are further from each other and leaving these 2 larger ones. Same kind of concept is going to go here. I'm going to come around here. We've got 5 fruit. I don't want these to turn the size of a golf ball or the size of a racquetball. I want these to be the size of a baseball. And so I'm going to come and take that fruit off, that fruit off, that fruit off, and out of these 3, I'm going to leave. So I'm going to leave. Usually I'm leaving 2 per group here. Here's one, clearly the smaller one. That's gone. Of these 3 fruit here, you see that there's one really big one. So I'm just going to pick. Again, you can move through this pretty quickly once you get it down. You don't have to think through it too much. So going through a tree like this, you can have this thing thinned in maybe 2-3 minutes. If you're moving quickly, that one's gone, that one's gone, that one's gone, that one's gone, and that one's gone. Boom, done. And you know, if you don't get it perfect, that's okay. You're going to still leave fruit on there. You just want to make sure you're trying to reduce the load on the tree. So if you accidentally pick off one that's slightly bigger, you don't have to be perfectionistic about it. Just come and reduce the number of fruit, and you're going to be happier overall with the results, even if it's not exactly perfect. We're going to take a look at these. So here, these are all similar sized. So again, even if they're similar sized, you're not doing anything wrong by taking off similar sized ones. Oh, if one's deformed, take it off. You want everything to be as happy and healthy as it can be. So if you have the choice, take off something that, if there's any sort of deformity to the fruit, you want to take it off. Of these 3, gone. First aim is to reduce the number of fruit. Second aim is to reduce the right fruit if you can help it. So this could take me another 20-30 seconds to do this entire little tree, this little Dorset Golden apple, but that's what you're looking for with pome fruit. You're going to leave 1 to 2 per cluster of fruit on your tree. And so that's what you want to pay attention to as you're doing apples and pears. Wow, well, thanks for tuning into this episode of The Busy Gardener, where we've looked at how to thin your fruit trees. You want to make sure you're doing that. Be principled to get it done. That's going to make such a big difference when it comes to the type of fruit that you get, the harvest that you have. Remember, you're going to be thinning your stone fruit and your pome fruit. No citrus, no subtropical, no avocados. Don't thin those. Mainly the deciduous stuff you want to take off. You want to thin really appropriately, thin aggressively, and make sure that you're getting that spacing or that rough fruit amount. Don't be perfectionistic about it. Just get out there and do it. If you get the wrong fruit a couple of times, that's okay. Your tree is going to be okay, and you're going to still get fruit afterward. This is just trying to decrease the number of fruit that's on your tree, so that way the ratio between the leaves and the fruit is a whole lot better. Well, if you like what's happening on this channel, would you take a minute to subscribe right now? Hit the notification bell right now. If not, that's okay too. But whether you got 1 tree in your orchard or 500, until next time, stay busy.